Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm currently chair of the review board. The board's purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for each of the properties that will be considered tonight. Each nomination form has been sent to review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of nominated properties, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of this meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend the meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about a particular property. You are welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether the property meets the criteria of significance of the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nominations, and this evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent to the owners of nominated properties and to the other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register program has also been sent to them. Each of the nominations will be presented by a staff member. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nomination and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion in the National Register, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and that the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. Before we begin, I'll call the roll by asking members of the State Historic Preservation Review Board to introduce themselves, briefly stating the role that they fill on the review board and their particular expertise. So we'll just go through the list. Board Member Brunfeld is not here. Board Member Decker.
Yes, I'm a member at large and I'm a retired archivist.
Thank you. Board Member Dyer.
They're a member at large. I am a librarian, archivist, public historian.
Thank you. Board Member James. Board Member Koski.
I'm Philip Koski. I serve the role of a historical architect, and I am a practicing architect in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Board Member Lavasser.
I am Andrea Lavasser. I am serving as the prehistoric archaeologist on the board, and I am retired from the Chippewa National Forest, where I was the forest archaeologist and heritage program manager.
Thank you. Board Member Mann.
Hi, my name is Rob Mann, and I'm a professor of anthropology at St. Cloud State University, and I serve as the historical archaeologist on the board.
Thank you. Board Member Olson.
Hi, my name's Steve Olson. I'm a licensed professional civil engineer, and I am a member at large on the board.
Thanks. Board Member Schulke.
Hi, Chris Schulke. I'm a member at large. I'm a public historian and executive director of the Otter Tail County Historical Society and headquartered in Fergus Falls, Minnesota.
Thank you. Board Member Solomonson.
Hi, I'm Kate Solomonson, and I'm an architectural historian. I teach architectural history at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities.
Thank you. Board Member Stark.
I am John Stark. I'm a historical architect on the board and a practicing architect in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Board Member White.
Hello, my name is Frank White. I am a board member at large, and I am a historian.
Thank you. And I'm Kristen Anderson. I'm one of the architectural historians, and I teach architectural history and art history at Augsburg University in Minneapolis. Thanks, everybody. And now updates from the SHPO office. Amy, is that you?
That is me, and then I'll hand it off to Jenny for a couple announcements as well. Welcome everybody, and it's good to see you all. I missed you in August. I was not at the August meeting, so it's good to see everyone this evening. We have several SHPO staff that are on this meeting as well that I'll just introduce. We have Michelle Decker, who's our administrative specialist, who's taking minutes. We have John Disher, who is our communications and grants manager, who is doing all of this wonderful WebEx work and monitoring the meeting for all of us. We have Jenny Way, our National Register architectural historian, and David Mather, our National Register archaeologist. And then myself, I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. So we're really glad that you're all joining us this evening. Just a reminder that we are conducting this as a virtual meeting pursuant to Minnesota statutes 13D.015. There isn't a health emergency, a health pandemic or emergency orders, but that is the statute that allows us to conduct a remote meeting using technology. And there are several conditions that we need to be meeting in order to host this meeting in this manner. One of them is that all members of the board can hear one another and can hear the conversation and the discussion. The second major one is that a roll call is to be taken for all votes. And then finally, that members of the public can also hear each other and the discussion and participate in the testimony. And then finally, just a couple reminders with this meeting. It is being recorded, and the board members, you've already done a great job while introducing yourself to turn on your cameras, but I would just encourage everyone to have their cameras on, board members to have their cameras on during discussion time and during the roll call as well. So that would be not during the presentation that staff is having. And then I just have two additional announcements before I hand it over to Jenny. It's been a little while since we've provided any staffing updates. And as you all know, we did lose our National Register historian, Dennis Gardner, earlier this year. And there's been a little bit of a change in the direction for filling that position. And we're actually going to be filling that position not filling the position, excuse me. The plan is to hire a second archaeologist. And so we've been in process of hiring a second archaeologist after we looked at need and just organization and the skill sets that we have on staff at this time. That was where we felt the biggest need was. And so that new archaeologist will be working, helping our environmental review team. And what that means for National Register team and the board is that David Mather is going to have more time to spend on National Register archaeological nominations to bring forward. So, wanted to, yeah, he's clapping. David's clapping. So I wanted to let the board know that that's kind of a strategic decision that we've made over the last several months, and we hope to be bringing on that new archaeologist in our office in December, fingers crossed. And then my final, my last announcement for me is just a heads up and a notice that staff have been planning, in particular David Mather has been planning and working with the Lower Sioux Indian community and the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer there for the State Review Board and the Lower Sioux Indian community to host a joint meeting to review jointly a National Register nomination. And so staff have been working on this and planning for the logistics and starting to think about how that's all going to work. I think these remote options will make something like that more feasible, and we're excited about that, those prospects. So more information to come on that for the board, but I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that this is something we're working toward, and I think we're shooting for the May 2023 board meeting, and we may have a few new members as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Jenny for a couple announcements.
Amy, good evening, y'all. I just have a few quick updates. So first and foremost, I want to take the opportunity to thank John Decker for his long and distinguished role as a State Review Board member. John did inform me last week that he will not be seeking reappointment at the end of the year. So after nearly 11 years on the board, he will be stepping down. I just wanted you to know, John, that SHPO staff sincerely thank you for your time and dedication to this process and this board, and you will truly be missed.
Yay.
Just so y'all know, he started in May of 2012.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
This leads me seamlessly, of course, into my next announcement. All scheduled vacancies, as well as the vacated member-at-large board position, are now open on the Secretary of State's website. So SHPO advertised the open seats yesterday or the day before via Gov Delivery, and I encourage you to forward that email to anyone you think that might be interested. If you have any questions or would like the direct link, please email me. I would be happy to share that with you. We are asking that all interested applicants complete the necessary application before November 22nd. We do have a number of applicants thus far, and we appreciate that. Any sitting board members that are seeking re-election will also need to reapply. And we will be trying to fill all of our vacated positions so that there is a seamless transition for our February meeting. And finally, we are excited. We're excited for the National Park Service. The National Park Service National Register of Historic Places Office is seeking comments on the revised National Register Bulletin 38, Guidelines for Evaluating and Documenting Traditional Cultural Properties. This has been a long time coming, and it's a lot of work to update one of these bulletins. So we are very excited that the National Park Service has that out for comment. The bulletin can be found on the National Park Service website, and we encourage anyone that's interested to take a look and provide feedback directly. The SHPO will be providing feedback as well as an office, but the NPS is seeking public comment. So that's super cool. And it will be, I'm sure, very, very educational as soon as I have an opportunity to sit down and read it. I look forward to waxing poetic about it with all of y'all. That is the end of my announcements. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Amy and Ginny, very much for that. The next thing on our agenda is the approval of minutes from the August 16th meeting. Are there any comments or corrections to those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve from Board Member Stark. Is there a second?
Board Member Schuelke, second.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? All right, we will vote by roll. Board Member Decker?
Aye.
Board Member Dyer?
Aye.
Board Member Koski?
Excuse
Board
me,
Member-
aye.
Board Member Lavasser?
Aye.
Board Member Mann?
Aye.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Schuelke?
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson?
Aye.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thanks, everybody. And now we'll turn to our nominations. And just to let everyone know, for each nomination this evening, a little bit of an outline of our specific process. There's a staff presentation of the nomination that's followed by a summary of the correspondence received. At that point, I will call on people who wish to make a statement about a specific property that's being presented at the time. We ask that you use the chat function to indicate that you wish to speak. As you heard in the opening statement, we encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether that property meets the criteria of significance for the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which we will evaluate the nominations, and the evaluation is the board's only assignment. The board is specifically interested in matters related to the criteria rather than the number of individual testimonies received. Participants are invited to make one comment, and please keep in mind the 3-minute time limit for each speaker. SHPO staff will provide a verbal indication when your time is up. After the public comment, the board will discuss the nominations. And Ginny, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Sorry, I got confused by my share button. All right, I am going to share my screen, and with luck, this will work the way I want it to. Right. Are you all seeing my Henry Hale Memorial Library slide?
Yes.
Great. Are you seeing my notes?
No.
Fantastic. So our first nomination tonight is the Henry Hale Memorial Library, Hamlin Branch in St. Paul, Ramsey County. The author is Barb Bazat, Historic Preservation Research. And before we get started on this particular nomination this evening, I did want to give you a quick summary of the timeline related to this property. The documentation was completed in June of 2022. In August, the St. Paul Heritage Preservation Commission, as well as the mayor of St. Paul, objected to the nomination. Consequently, the nomination was not considered at the August State Review Board meeting as was originally planned. The nomination preparer then appealed to the keeper of the National Register of Historic Places. The keeper sustained that appeal in October and directed SHPO to complete the nomination process, which is where we are this evening. Without further ado, the Henry Hale Memorial Library, Hamlin Branch, more commonly referred to as the Hamlin Midway Library, was constructed in 1930. The nomination states that it was designed by Carl H. Buteau, who was employed with the Education Department of the City Architect's Office. Here we are looking at the primary north elevation, camera facing southeast. At left is a rendering of the primary facade dated 1929. The Hamlin neighborhood lies approximately 5 miles northwest of downtown St. Paul. The mostly agricultural area began to change rapidly when Hamlin University relocated to its present location in 1880. According to the nomination, quote, by the mid to late 1880s, the residents were a diverse mix of ethnic backgrounds and included university faculty, doctors, and other professionals along with skilled workers, end quote. Hamlin was officially incorporated into the city in 1885. By 1908, the St. Paul Public Library System established a delivery station at 720 North Snelling Avenue in the Hamlin neighborhood. This station was one of 11 throughout the city by 1910. At left is a close-up of the subject parcel on the 1928 plat map. Prior to library construction, outlined in the square is the location of the library as it currently sits today. In the circle is the 720 North Snelling Avenue delivery station. At right is a current plan view of the area with the library outlined in blue. The library reflects the late Gothic Revival style, a type of fanciful architecture often employed for university buildings in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The name Henry Hale Memorial Library, Hamlin Branch, is carved into the limestone surround above the main entrance. At left is a detail of the primary entrance and stair at the north elevation, camera facing south. At the top right is a detail of the inscription and torch at the top of the entrance parapet, camera facing south. At bottom right is a wrought iron lantern, camera facing south. In 1882, the St. Paul City Council approved funding for the city's first free library. However, it wasn't until 1917 that the first purpose-built central library building was completed. This building, located in downtown, was funded in part by James J. Hill, the railroad magnate. That same year, the city was successful in receiving funding from the Carnegie Corporation to build 3 branch libraries constructed in Riverview, St. Anthony Park, and Arlington Hills. No additional branch libraries were constructed until 1930, when the funds from the Hale bequest were released and designs drawn up for the next 2 branch libraries, Miriam Park and Hamlin. It would be nearly 20 years before the next branch libraries were constructed. At left, we see the west elevation, including the elevator addition, camera facing east. And at right is the east elevation showing the chimney, camera facing west. Henry Hale was a local attorney, property owner, and philanthropist that, like many men of his generation, sought to leave a personal legacy in the form of library access. When he died in 1890, his will included a clause that required the construction from funds out of his estate of a free public library and a free dispensary. However, the will further stipulated that the funds could not be dispersed until 25 years after his death. At left is the rear or south elevation of the building, camera facing north. At right is the east elevation with the non-contributing shed visible in the foreground, camera facing west. Hale saw his bequest of funds for a library as a type of seed money that would support construction of additional libraries in areas of the cities that lacked access. Hale went so far as to suggest that the library be built in the Hamlin neighborhood. He writes, quote, "One of the growing residence districts in St. Paul, which in time will be equal to any in the city, both as to desirability and density of population, is that of North Hamlin, and a library at Snelling and Minnehaha would add to the convenience of all the people who now or will hereafter reside in that district." End quote. Here we see two views of the windows and their stone details. Both photographs are of the north facade, camera facing south. Hamlin, the neighborhood, has a long history of activism in connection with its various forms of libraries. As the population of the neighborhood grew relatively rapidly from the 1880s to the early 1900s, neighborhood groups and clubs began to consider the need for a brick and mortar library, even before a permanent main library had been purpose-built downtown. Beginning in the 1890s, the discussions came primarily from residents who were organized for the effort by women who met each other through the half dozen or so social clubs in the area. The activities of the women's clubs, often overshadowed by those of the men's, were integral to producing the desired result. At left is a photo of the east elevation, camera facing southwest. At right is the original plan of the first floor of the building. In 1913, after years of not having regular library services, the citizens of Hamlin appealed to the trustees of the estate of Henry Hale to release the funds for the construction of 2 libraries, and the Hamlin Commercial Club purchased the land on which the building would eventually be built. At left is the interior fireplace nook, camera facing east. At right is the interior fireplace nook window and southeast window, camera facing southeast. The neighborhood was eventually able to secure the necessary funding for construction, but it was not without tremendous and continual effort by advocates within the community. One of the most persistent and outspoken of which was the Hamlin Fortnightly Club, led by Mary Dwight Akers. At left is a view of the interior main library room, the first floor showing arches at the left, camera facing east. At right is a view of the interior of the library circa 1930. Note the arches at the right of the image. Once the new library was opened, it quickly became the new permanent home of a variety of community activities. Several local organizations also met in the building in the early years. Community activities continue to take place in the library with the support of library staff and the Hamlin Library Association. At left is a view of the entrance vestibule, camera facing south. At right is a view of the staircase to the ground level fire door and first floor from the basement, camera facing west. The period of significance for this property is 1930 to 1972. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is A, and the area of significance are social history and education. The period of significance begins with the library's construction date and ends 50 years from today, in keeping with National Park Service guidelines. The Henry Hale Memorial Library, Hamlin Branch, is associated with the community's efforts to establish regular library services in the Hamlin neighborhood and its ongoing use as a place for education. For these reasons, the Henry Hale Memorial Library, Hamlin Branch, is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you, Jenny. Is there any correspondence related to this nomination?
In total, we have 68 pieces of correspondence related to this property. Prior to the August 2022 meeting, the SHPO received 23 pieces of correspondence objecting to the property's nomination, including letters from the owner's representative, the mayor of St. Paul, and the City of St. Paul's Heritage Preservation Supervisor, as well as additional information from the nomination preparer. In preparation for November's meeting, we have received 5 pieces of correspondence objecting to the property's listing, including letters from the owner's representative and the mayor of St. Paul. We have also received 36 emails supporting the property's nomination to the National Register.
Thanks, Jenny. If you are interested in making a comment and you've not signed up to make a brief 3-minute statement and wish to do so, please do so now. by using the chat function. People will be called upon in the order that they appear on this list. When you're called upon to speak, please unmute yourself, turn on your camera, and state your name when you're invited to speak. If by the time your name is called, you have decided that you no longer wish to speak, please feel free to decline, and we will move on to the next speaker. And we will begin the public comments. Let me just check the list as it's appeared right here with Barb Sporlian.
Chair Anderson,
Yes.
before we move into the public testimony portion, John and I are both getting a message that there are some users potentially on the meeting that their organizations may prevent them from using the chat function. So if there are members of the public out there that are not able to use the chat function, I'm hoping that they'll be able to at least raise their hand. So just wanted to make that, because this is a new message we haven't seen before. So John was trying to check in on that.
Great. Thank you very much, Amy, for pointing that out. We'll be working then off of two lists, the one that John sends me about names that do appear in the chat, and then we'll just, I guess, look for raised hands, and I'll count on the staff to work with me. We maybe won't be able to go according to when people signed up to speak or raised their hand to speak, but we'll make sure that everyone who wants to speak is able to do that. So Barb Sporlian, or Sporline, are you ready to go?
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. My name is Barb Sporline, and I am the interim library director for the St. Paul Public Library. I'm just trying to pull up my notes here. I will just provide a few summary comments. We did do a very detailed response for multiple submissions, and we hope you've had the chance to read those. As stated in the submission, as the building owner, the St. Paul Public Library objects to the nomination of the Hamlin Midway Library to the National Register of Historic Places. We don't believe the building meets the eligibility criteria, and we also believe the nomination contains errors that haven't been corrected. We have conducted extensive study of this facility to develop design options that would bring it up to the modern standards for accessible, safe, flexible, and dynamic library space. Out of this thorough research, which included community engagement processes, we have stated our intention to build a new building on the site that bridges history and the future. We at St. Paul Public Library are committed to honoring and incorporating the history of this library into the new public library that is designed to be safe and welcoming, inviting, affirming, and comfortable for people of all cultures and abilities and communities. The early 20th century movement to expand public libraries is well represented in St. Paul. As mentioned earlier, we have 4 libraries in St. Paul that are on the National Register of Historic Places. 3 remain part of the library system. 2 are neighborhood Carnegie libraries, and the other is our capital city's iconic downtown library, the George Latimer Library. Rebuilding a 1-story library on site is the option that allows the city and library to achieve the following priority objectives. It will be the most equitably accessible space where all patrons enter the building at the same place and move around a single floor with the most ease. It's the most sustainable, energy efficient design that implements the city's climate action plan. It's the most operationally efficient for staff. It's safest for patrons and staff, the sightlines within the building and then inside and out. It allows for the largest square footage, and this is key, needed to accommodate what residents want in their library. A large community room, flexible partner space, expanded children's areas, separate teen areas, study rooms, wellness, meeting room, reading garden. And it's the most cost effective. Renovating the existing building in its condition, site plan, and layout is cost prohibitive and leaves the design far short of meeting current and future library needs. It would not be financially responsible for the city to spend money to address all the failings of the building and just have a reduced square footage addition. I did read a lot of the submitted comments that state preservation and meeting city goals and library needs within a new building is a false choice. In this case, it's not. The city's comp plan policy, HP 16, addresses the need to balance preservation and new construction And in this case, the analysis and needs supports new construction. Just a quick reminder that the city's chief elected official, Mayor Carter, the lawful property owner, the St. Paul Public Library, the professionals at LSE Architects, the professionals in the city's real estate design and construction division, and the HPC itself chose not to take action. So we're a little confused while we're at this spot. But in conclusion, I just want to say, again, we don't think the building meets the eligibility criteria. It's very detailed in our response. It does contain some errors that we think are notable and worth correcting. And back in the day, I think it's really worth knowing that when this existing library was built, the neighbors then advocated for better and larger library services for Hamlet. That is the exact same goal we're pursuing today. The historic legacy of a library at this site will be maintained and enhanced through the construction of a new library. So for these reasons and more, we respectfully request that the State Review Board not support the nomination. And thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Barb. Let's see if John has a new message or if there's anyone else indicating another way if they'd like to make a comment. John, are you seeing anything?
I do not have any additional speakers listed and signed up to chat right now.
Okay. So before we move on to the board discussion, one last call for people to make a statement if they're interested in doing so. Anything from you, John? No raised hands? Anyone else? Okay. All right. In that case, we'll move ahead for the board discussion of the property. Any comments or questions from the board as we begin? Any board members chiming in?
I'll kick it off. Hi, I'm board member Lindsay Dyer.
Thank you.
And I just want to say how much I appreciated hearing from the community and how passionate they were about their library. My statement, I am a St. Paul resident and have 11 years of experience working in libraries. I support the library professionals, administration, friends group, and patrons as they seek out accessible solutions for their buildings. That all makes a lot of sense. That said, the nomination of the Henry Hale Memorial Library to the Historic Register does not restrict the City of St. Paul from making those accessibility accommodations. Therefore, according to the nomination as it was written, and according to the precedents of past nominations, I am inclined to vote in favor of this nomination as I believe it has been adequately defended at the local level significance. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any other comments or questions from board members? Yes, board members Stark, go ahead.
Unmute. I too appreciate the desire to keep a library in this neighborhood, and the importance of library in a community is really strong. You saw that from all the people that responded to this. But looking at our task of questioning whether the property meets the criteria of significance of the National Register, the bones of this building are really good. It's a lot better than a lot of buildings I've worked on and are on the National Register. So the desire to keep this building alive, its adaptive reuse, if it's as a library or something else, I think is still something that we need to keep it here. Once it's gone forever. So I am fully supportive of keeping this, adding it to the National Register. Thank you.
Thank you, board member Stark. Other comments or questions from board members?
Yeah, board member Schuelke, I'll chime in.
Thanks, Chris.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to defer, of course, to the architectural integrity to my more knowledgeable colleagues than myself. But the nomination speaks to the building significance under criterion A, right, of social history and education. So I was a little taken aback by the argument that claimed that the history of the library is not unique enough to warrant preservation. I feel that's a kind of a highly subjective argument and kind of adheres to what a letter from Bethany Gladhill described as the Washington slept here kind of history. In other words, the great man type of history. So historical significance is not only embodied in the great architectural masterpieces, but in more modest buildings like the library and others that we're going to consider tonight. So because of that, and the fact that the library, the building itself has been rooted in St. Paul for generations, and I believe can help bridge the equity gap, because some people complained about that the building kind of embodies the inequality of past generations, and therefore it should be kind of taken down so we can move forward to the future. I'd certainly challenge that I think the library as a historic connecting piece in St. Paul can achieve the same goal. So I am going to support the nomination.
Thank you, Board Member Schulke. Are there comments or questions? Anyone else on the board have a comment or question to make? Yes, Board Member Decker.
Hello. I would like to ask the question of the interim director. The true owners of that library are the people of St. Paul and the neighborhood. So I think they've had a good say in this, and I do agree with the ones that want to preserve it. In financial, I've looked at financial on both sides, and definitely renovating this library would be a lot less. And also, I've looked at the exterior of the new building, which I really like, but it really doesn't fit into that neighborhood. So that's another thing that I would consider, and I'm going to vote yes on this.
I would just like to respond that we have heard from a very vocal, well-organized group with a very specific agenda about preserving a building. But we have heard from many residents that want a library that works for them. And whoever made the comment about good bones, this library does not have good bones. It has significant issues, and it is not less to renovate it and do an addition, but you would end up with less than an ideal library. And I don't think the design is the question at hand.
Thank you, Barb.
Maybe you didn't see all the materials that were submitted about its condition.
And I didn't.
Kristen, would you mind if I just jump in real quick?
Yep,
I just
please.
want, I appreciate a robust conversation, and I understand that this is a complicated conversation on all fronts, but I do want to remind the board that your role here is to assess the criteria of eligibility. So while there are other things I know that we think of as people and as interested parties and as professionals, we do need to try and stay focused on the task at hand, which is the criteria of eligibility according to the National Park Service. So, thank you.
Madam
Thanks,
Chair, this is Board Member White.
Go ahead, Frank.
I think the nomination has provided, again, the criteria very detailed. I also think when this was appealed and went to the keeper, it was returned saying that there was enough information here to be considered, as well as some additional professionals. So for me, to answer the question of whether this should be on the National Register or not, I completely support the nomination for this to be on the this library to be on the National Register.
Thank you, Board Member White. Other comments? Yes, Board Member Koski.
I would just like to state that in my opinion, the nomination meets the criteria for significance and integrity, and I move that we endorse this nomination and advance it to the national level.
Board Member Koski has made a motion. Is there a second?
Board Member Schulke, second.
Thank you, Board Member Schulke. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All right, looks like we're ready to vote.
Can I ask a clarifying question about process?
Ginny, is that okay?
I'm
that's
still
appropriate.
confused about even why we're here, because I believe it was Amy or Ginny who told us that if the HPC doesn't take action and the chief elected official opposes and the property and the lawful property owner is the library, that it wouldn't get to this point. So we're still confused by that. And so if you could clear that up, that would be great.
I can take a stab at addressing that. That was the stage that we're at in August. And you're correct with the negatives that were interpreted by this given and interpreted by various officials in the city. The board was unable to consider the nomination in August. And the next step after that was the opportunity for an appeal. And the appeal was made and then approved by the keeper. So now the board considers it because of the directive that came from Washington on the basis of considering that appeal. Ginny, Amy, did I get that right? Anything you want to add?
Yes, that is correct, Chair Anderson. And I do just want to, if I can just add that I want to just remind everyone that the chat should only be used to indicate if you want to speak. We really, in a public setting like this, cannot have a second dialogue in the chat function. So please only use the chat to indicate if you'd like to speak. Thank you.
Ginny, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, if people are looking for the citation is 36 CFR 60.12 in the National Historic Preservation Act. So, I'm sorry, not the act, the Code of Federal Regulations. So, because, as you said, because the SHPO interpreted the non-action by the HPC and the clear objection by the chief elected official both to be a lack of support, we took no further action in accordance with the regulations, and the nomination was not presented in August. After the appeal, the keeper, as you said, Kristen, did sustain the nomination as per the regulations, and this is where we are. So, Barb Sporline, I appreciate that it's a convoluted process, and it was new to us as well. So thank you for your patience as we sat and tried to learn how to navigate this, but this is how we arrived at today's meeting.
So we have a motion that we're considering. Are there any other points of discussion from the board? Okay, we'll call the roll. Board Member Decker? John, Board Member Decker?
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Dyer?
Aye.
Board Member Koski?
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser?
Aye.
Board Member Mann?
Aye.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Schulke?
Aye.
Are you muted, Chris? Board Member Schulke?
No,
No. All right. Board Member Solomonson?
I mean, I voted aye, not no.
Thank you. You weren't muted. You voted aye. Thank you for the clarification. Board Member Solomonson?
Aye.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
Board Member White?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone, for that. And we move on to the next nomination on the agenda, which is the John Poorbaugh Block, Jasper, Pipestone County. Again, if you have comments to make, please request a position to comment in the chat. And we begin with the presentation from Ginny, some discussion of correspondence, and then we open the meeting for discussion after that. So Ginny, are you ready? We see your screen, but don't hear you yet. Oops. Now we're seeing something else. Now we have your presenter view, Ginny.
I apologize. My computer does not want to both unmute me and show presenter view at the same time. Let me restart at the John Forbaugh building. Okay, how does that look, Chair Anderson?
That's good. Thank you. You're here.
Thank you for that. My apologies.
Okay.
All right, we're seeing the next nomination is the John Forbaugh block in Jasper, Pipestone County. The preparer is Alexa K. McDowell, AK Consulting. The John M. Forbaugh block is situated in Jasper, Minnesota, a small community in the southwest corner of the state. The building is a two-story commercial building constructed of the community's distinctive Sioux quartzite. Completed in the spring of 1889, the building was constructed at the easternmost corner of Jasper's historic commercial corridor. Here on the left, we see the 1898 plat map with the commercial corridor outlined in blue and the Forbaugh block shown in red. And on the right, the subject property is shown in the blue box on both images. The character of the Forbaugh block is seen through the stone construction, particularly that combined use of pink jasper quartzite and red pipestone. This combination appears on the primary elevations, both the south and the west, where the body of the rock-faced pink jasper and rock-faced red pipestone trim and decorative detailing are most prominent. On the right is a view of the facade and west elevations, camera facing northwest. At left is a photo of the building in 1981 from roughly the same angle. While many of the extant buildings in Jasper were constructed of Sioux quartzite, the John M. Forbaugh block is the best representative of the stone used in a commercial building. This is due in large part to the level of detail found in the design. At left is the facade stepped parapet of the building, including the nameplate, camera facing south. At right top is a view of the stone decorative detail on the west elevation, camera facing east. And at bottom right is a detail of the rough cut ashlar finish and beaded joints, also on the west elevation, camera facing east. In contrast to the highly finished primary elevations, those on the east and the north are roughly finished. Here on the left, we see a view of the primary facade as well as the east elevation, camera facing northwest. And at the right is a view of the rear or north elevation, camera facing southwest. The first floor of the Forbaugh block was built for use by the Quarry Store, a general merchandise business run by Davies and Coombe. The quarry opened in the storefront when the building was completed in July of 1889. The first floor was renovated by the Jasper Area Historical Museum in 1981 and is characterized by its rectangular form, single open space, and high ceiling. At left is the first floor, camera looking north, and at right is the same space, camera looking southeast. The second floor was occupied by a family soon after the building was completed. Later news reports indicate that the use of its use as an office space. But beginning in 1917, the editor of the Jasper Journal and his family lived in the apartment. The upper story contains a living room, dining room, kitchen, bathroom, and 2 small bedrooms. At left is the second floor dining room, camera looking south, and at right is the second floor living room, camera looking southeast. While built as a commercial retail store, the Forbaugh block was most notably the home of the Jasper Journal, the town's only newspaper between 1888, when it was established, and 2020. Originally located in a small Main Street storefront, the Journal moved to the Forbaugh block in 1917, where it remained until 1972. At left is a detail of the second floor, which is a former bedroom, and at right is the second floor kitchen. Both views here are to the southwest. In general, the Jasper Journal was a publication that focused primarily on local news, although during its long history, there were periods where regional, state, and national news was its focus. Within Jasper, the newspaper was the source for disseminating important information and was significant to the everyday life of the community. For 55 years, the newspaper operated out of the first floor of the building, while the editors and their families lived upstairs. Here we see 3 pages of the Jasper Journal through time. At left is 1888, in the center is 1912, and at right is 1970. The periods of significance for this property are 1889 and 1916 to 1972. The level of significance is local. The National Register criteria are A and C, and the areas of significance are architecture and communications. The periods of significance, the first period of significance marks the building's placed in service date and is therefore representative of the building's architectural significance. The second period embraces the years in which the building was home to the Jasper Journal. The John M. Poorbaugh block is a distinctive example of Sioux quartzite stone used on a commercial building. It is also the longtime home of Jasper's only newspaper. For these reasons, the John M. Poorbaugh block is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Is there any correspondence related to this nomination?
There is not.
All right, thank you very much. And again, if there's anyone who would like to make a comment from the audience, please make a request in the chat or raise your hand somehow. Otherwise, let us know that you would like to comment on this nomination, and we will call on you. Just refreshing my email. John, do we have anything in the chat? Any requests?
No requests for discussion on this from the public.
Thank you. All right, how about the board? Comments and discussions from the board on this nomination? Yes, Board Member Koski.
Thank you. I just had one question about the red quartzite. I'm not that familiar with the material, but is it both the light pink stone in the body of the building as well as the dark reddish lines? Are those both considered red quartzite?
The red quartzite is the dark red in color. The Sioux quartzite is the pink stone.
Okay. Thanks. That doesn't change my mind at all. It's still a very handsome building.
Any other questions, deal breakers or not? Comments, discussion. Board Member Solomonson raises her hand.
I just want to say that I'm really delighted with this nomination. I love the use of stone in this building and all of it. And the wall that is not the wall that assumes that another building is going to grow up to it is as beautiful as the more finished walls. So it's just a gem.
Thank you. Board Member Koski, I see your hand up. Is that an old hand raise? Okay, very good. And
sorry, yeah.
That's fine, not a problem. You're welcome to speak more than once. But Board Member Stark is interested in saying something. Go ahead.
I agree with Catherine. The building is, it's old, it's kept up, it looks really marvelous with that stone. It's such a unique regional kind of architecture at that point. The insides have been changed quite a bit, and the front facade's a little different, but there's a possibility the columns are under there. Something could be changed, but for a small town to have just a beautiful building that people really care about and have stayed around, plus the fact the newspaper was there and it was the source of information for everybody, it was pretty good. So I like this nomination.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, anything before we move ahead? Are we ready for a motion?
So moved.
That's how we know we're ready for a motion. Thank you, Board Member
Second.
Solomonson. And I'm sorry, who's second?
Board Member
Member
Stark, seconds.
Thank you very much. Any final further discussion on the nomination? All right, here we go. Board Member Decker.
Aye.
Board Member Dyer.
Aye.
Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser.
Aye.
Board Member Mann,
Aye.
Board Member Olson,
Aye.
Board Member Schulke,
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson,
Aye.
Board Member Stark,
Aye.
Board Member White,
Aye.
and the chair joins the rest and votes aye. Thank you, everyone. And next, Ginny, we turn to District School number 3 in Park Township, Clay County. And again, if people would like to prepare to chat about this, or make a comment, please request a spot to chat in the, or to make a comment in the chat. Ginny, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. This nomination is the District number 3 school, better known as the Rolog Wooden School in Park Township, Clay County. The author is Greg Gout and Stephen Martins. They're both historic preservation consultants. School District number 3 of Clay County, more commonly referred to as the Rolog Woodland School, was built in 1892 on a 1-acre plot of land in the southeast quadrant of Park Township, about 1 mile east of the town of Rolog and about 8.5 miles southwest of the town of Holly. Here we see the property indicated in the bottom right of the left-hand photograph, photograph, as well as within its local boundary here on the corner. The school is a 1-story gable-roofed, wood-framed rectangular structure sheathed in weatherboard siding. Historical photos indicate that the vestibule was not part of the original construction, but was likely added in the 1930s or early 1940s. Here we see the front facade of the building at right, camera facing west, and at left is a photo of the school circa 1946. Attached to the north half of the rear facade is a gabled roofed shed about 15 square feet that originally was used to store wood for heating of the school. At left is the north elevation, camera facing south. At right is the south toilet room and wash basin alcove in the attached shed, camera facing west. Before statehood in 1858, the territorial legislature established a system of common schools, that is, 1-room ungraded schools governed by local districts, where at least 5 families lived. These legal framework prioritized local control. School districts were autonomous units of government which managed their own school, hired the teacher, and provided for heat and maintenance of the school building. Here we see the south elevation of the school, camera facing north. In June of 1873, the first rural school, School District number 3, was organized in Park Township, even before the township government was established. At the beginning, District number 3 covered the entirety of Park Township. As the population grew, 3 additional districts were organized, shrinking the territory covered by District number 3. Surviving teacher reports from the early years of the school indicate that the number of enrolled students fluctuated between 29 and 41. At left is the north elevation, camera facing south. At right are 2 photographs of school students circa 1946. The interior of the building is 1 large room. In the northwest corner of the room is a cast iron jacketed stove manufactured by the Smith System Heating Company of Minneapolis. In addition to children's education, the schoolhouses served as community centers in rural areas where there were often no other venues for public or family gatherings. This was certainly the case at the at the Rolog Woodland School. At right is the classroom with the entrance door and camera facing east. At left is the jacket stove in the northwest corner, camera facing northwest. District number 3 was the first rural district in the county, and because local farm families valued access to a nearby school under their direct control, District number 3 turned down all consolidation proposals. By 1916, it was one of only 2 rural districts. At the end of the 1960-61 school year, it was the very last rural district in the county to be consolidated. Of Clay County's 93 ungraded 1-room schoolhouses, the District number 3 school is the only one which has survived in its original location and represents the schoolhouse. At left is the classroom with teacher's desk, view facing west. At right is the same view in 1961. on the final day of school. The period of significance for this property is 1892 to 1961. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is A. The area of significance is education. The period of significance begins with the construction of the schoolhouse and ends at the final day of school in the spring of 1961. The District Number 3 school is associated with and exemplifies the efforts of local farmers to provide basic, locally controlled education for their children. It is associated with the efforts of farmers to resist consolidation and retain control over their own school. For these reasons, the District Number 3 school is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you, Ginny. And is there any correspondence to summarize for this nomination, this property?
There is one piece of correspondence for this property. Stephen Larson, the Clay County Board of Commissioners, writes to express the board's support for listing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm looking at anything that John may have sent me an email. John, are there any requests to speak about this property?
We have no requests to speak.
Okay, any requests in person to speak from the public?
I'll just add too, I think you all probably know that the authors, most of the authors of the nominations are present this evening as well, in case there's any questions.
Thank you, Amy.
Madam Chair, this is Board Member White.
Go ahead. Thanks, Frank.
I have said this before. I am amazed at history. Things that I continue to learn while being involved in the SHPO, and to imagine that the people of this community, of this area, put together this school, and it's been maintained the way it has for all of these years. It's a tribute again to who we are in Minnesota. The one downside to the photos is those desks look familiar.
Good times, huh, Frank? Board Member Olson has a comment. Question.
Yeah, I guess, and maybe I missed it in the nomination paperwork, but it seemed to be a big deal to be the first school, and it seemed to be a big deal to be the last school. So how did they end up being number 3 instead of district number 1 is what I don't understand.
Greg, are you here and can you address that question?
Yeah.
Arthur?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think district number 1 in Clay County was in Moorhead, understandably. And district number 2 was at a town called Glendon, which was where the 2 big railroad lines intersected. And so both of them were not exactly rural schools. And so they were towns, they were town schools basically. So when this little group in Park Township organized their school near Rolog, they were really the first, they were number 3. So they were district number 3 and they were the first rural school. So that's the reason why it was number 3. Thanks for the question, Steve. Since I'm online here, I just want to mention that, this history of education in Minnesota, public education, is really remarkable. And I've always been amazed that no one's ever written a book about it, because it's just a particularly phenomenal story. 8,000 school districts. But there really is 2 big parts of the story. One is the creation of all these school districts by local farmers. And the second part of the story is the state trying to make them less, trying to consolidate them. And so what's interesting about this particular story is that they played a big role in both sides of the story, in creating the school district very early and then being kind of the last holdout in Clay County against this wave of consolidation that the state was just working on and working on and working on for decades and decades. And so it's an interesting, the building itself is just like any other one-room schoolhouse, but the story behind it, I think, is very interesting.
Thanks, Greg. Board Member Stark.
Greg, question for you. I am just old enough that some of my classmates went to country school. What year do you know if all the country schools closed in Minnesota?
I'm trying to remember. I've done one other one that I think lasted longer. That was the Birchville School in Hennepin County, which I did a couple years ago, which I think went later into the 60s. I think it might have been 1967. And so, but that was pretty much the end of the line. There's just so much pressure. And that, as I mentioned, that the thing about high schools was really a big part of it. Because when these common schools started, there wasn't any high schools. But then the need for high schools kept growing, and these little common school districts could not possibly provide a high school. And so eventually that's what really, I think, broke them. And so they had to really consolidate with some larger group that could provide a high school. But really, that went into at least the mid 60s. It's really remarkable. And I'm pretty sure Birchville went to 67.
That sounds about right.
That's got to be about the end of the line. I don't think there was many. There couldn't have been, possibly, but I doubt if any after that.
I grew up in Steele County, and there were a couples that were still open, and my friends, that class of 18, and they were at the head of our class. They didn't lose anything in their country school education. And going to a Christmas program at the school was really cool. So I really appreciate the stories of that. And the fact that this building is almost like the day they walked out. It's put a new foundation on, and they put a different roof on, but it's pretty amazing to see that, and it's really nice to see it being preserved. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah,
Board
Board
Member
Member Schulke, just a couple. I was in Rolla yesterday doing a program at the Lutheran Church, and talked to one of the people there. Went to that school, so that was interesting. An older gentleman, and the fact is that these one-room rural schoolhouses are very rare now, especially in this kind of condition. We did a survey a number of years ago in Otter Tail County. There were 289 rural school districts in Otter Tail County, and there are very few. They've either been torn down or converted into houses, or completely altered. So kudos to Clay County Historical Society and Clay County, and for preserving this rural school, which is they're fast being lost from our landscape.
Thank you.
So I would like to make a nomination, or make a
There we go.
motion to nominate this building.
Thank you, Board Member Schulke. A second?
I second it, Board Member Decker.
Thank you, Board Member Decker. Other comments, questions, discussion before we vote? All right, here we go. Board Member Decker.
Aye.
Board Member Dyer.
Aye.
Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thanks, everyone. And then finally, our last property for this evening is the Herman Schrader House and Livery in Shakopee, Scott County. And a reminder, if you'd like to comment, please put a request into the chat or be prepared to raise your hand and get our attention as we get to that point. Ginny, are you all set?
I am. Thank you, Chair Anderson.
Thanks.
So our final nomination is the Herman Schrader House and Livery in Shakopee, Scott County. The author is Aaron Q. and Selah Miller, the 106 group. The Herman Schrader House and Livery is located in Shakopee, Minnesota, in the northeast corner of Bluff Avenue East and Market Street. The property includes a two-story brick house built in 1880 and a circa 1880 brick livery that has two smaller additions constructed prior to 1937. Here we are looking at the primary north elevation of the house in the foreground, camera facing southeast. The livery and its additions are visible in the rear, camera facing southeast. The house and livery are the last remaining resources historically associated with the Schrader Brick and Lime Manufacturing Company brickyard, which was located to the north and northeast of the nomination boundary. Here we see Here we see on the left the nomination boundary indicated in the dashed line. And then on the right, we see the larger Schrader Brick and Lime Manufacturing Brickyard, which is no longer extant. The house was built for Herman Schrader and was his primary place of residence from 1880 until his death in 1922, during which time he operated the Schrader Brick and Lime Manufacturing Company. The house in particular displays the masonry skills of the company's craftsmen. Its form and many of its details are representative of vernacular architecture found in Shakopee in the late 1800s. Many other houses in this period were constructed of local Shakopee brick and feature arched fenestration opening and stone sills. However, this house is distinctive with its intricate brick details, including egg and dark trim, rosettes in the plaster capitals, and carved skirts of acanthus leaves. So on the left, we see the main building, the primary facade, and the east facade, camera facing northwest. And at the top right, we see the acanthus leaves, and at the bottom right, we see the egg and dart and other brick detailing, camera facing north. And I apologize, this copy of my presentation doesn't have the photo references on it, so I'm going to pause a little bit as I try to think through what I'm seeing. The Schrader Brick and Lime Manufacturing Company was founded in 1876, but annual production grew significantly from 500,000 bricks in 1881 to 3 million bricks in 1906 under Herman's leadership. The company was very successful producing brick for local and regional construction. Many local businesses were built using red Shakopee brick, which was the signature color of Schrader's bricks. On the left, we see Schrader Brickyard's advertisement showing some of the pieces that we see it at use on the house on the right. So on the right, we're seeing this porch skirt, camera facing north. And I do not have a date for the advertisement, my apologies. Here again, we see the building. My goodness. Okay, here again, we're looking at the rear facade of the building on the right and a secondary facade or a secondary elevation on the left. And on the right, we see a photograph of brickyard masons and workers amidst a pile of bricks that are being stacked in order to be shipped. The Schrader Brick and Lime Manufacturing Company was the most successful of the Shakopee brickyards. To improve shipping convenience, the Northwestern Railway Company built an extension of sidetrack for the Herman's Company out to a factory purchased by Schrader to be used as a warehouse for storing lime and other building materials. The location of the factory is currently not known. At left, we see the rear elevation of the house, camera facing south, and at right, we see a secondary elevation of the house. This would be the west elevation, camera facing east. Many downtown Shakopee businesses were built of the local red brick. About 1 in every 100 bricks made from the Schroeder Brickyard was stamped with the word Shakopee, which give rise to the name Shakopee brick, known widely throughout the region. The Fairmount, Minnesota courthouse, as well as the Village Hall in Norwood, Young America, are constructed of Shakopee brick. On the left, we see the interior of the porch, camera facing east, and at right, we see a second floor bedroom at the interior of the building, camera facing south. The circa 1880 livery and its 2 additions is also on the property, as mentioned earlier. The livery is largely utilitarian in nature. It does have an early addition, 3 additions. You can see the gable roof here is the original livery. There is an extension addition on to the north, a shed addition to the east, and then an outhouse addition farther east, the final addition. This is these are camera facing northwest. This is, again, the outhouse addition and the rear facade of the livery, camera facing southwest. The livery does not feature any notable details. The notable details found on the house. However, as an outbuilding, the simpler design is expected. Oddly, strangely, hilariously, the outhouse does have intricate details such as corbelling and a small turret. It is unusual to find this type of detail on a building of this nature. For whatever reason, I just find it adorable. And there's the outhouse with the decorative brickwork. We also see the interior of the livery, camera facing west. The period of significance for this property is 1880 to 1922. The level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is B, and the area of significance is art. The period of significance begins with the construction date of the home and ends with the death of Herman Schrader, for which the property is being nominated. The Schroeder Brick and Lime Company brickyard is no longer extant and therefore does not retain sufficient integrity to convey the historic significance of the industry within the city of Shakopee. Herman Schrader's house, however, is the best representation of his productive life and the importance of the Schrader Brick and Lime Manufacturing Company to the city of Shakopee. For these reasons, the property is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Wow.
Thank you.
My apologies. I had two versions of this PowerPoint presentation. That one did not have any notes.
Oh.
So,
Good job.
I'm sorry.
Amazing
for
work.
that.
Yep, you did good work.
Forgive me for not giving it its due. It's a really lovely property, and I know you've all read the nominations, so.
Ginny, is there any correspondence to summarize here?
There is not, but as Amy pointed out earlier, the authors are in the audience.
Excellent, thank you. And John, any requests to comment coming up in the chat?
We have no requests for discussion or to comment.
All right, and anyone looking to raise their hand to make a comment before we turn to the board discussion? In which case we turn to the board discussion. Anyone on the board have any comments or questions about the nomination?
Board member
member
Scholke,
Stark.
I'm
Yep.
sorry.
That's it, go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious about the outhouse, why the detailing.
Aren't
on the
we
house.
all? Aren't we all?
So, did you uncover anything in your research?
Erin, would you like to address that?
Sure. We did not get any more information about that. We were just told by locals that this was an outhouse used by the brickyard workers.
I'm fascinated by it, quite frankly, and I bet it was just a wonderful joke. I mean, what else would you do as a highly skilled mason?
Amazing. It's a brick outhouse. I know there's another phrase for that, but you don't usually see them. You hear the phrase, and wow, how much fun they must have had. Other comments or questions?
As board member Stark.
Thank you, John. Go ahead.
I'm sure David Mather loves outhouses because archaeologists love digging in them. There's so much history in it, and it proves things, and it's absolutely gorgeous. They didn't say anything about holes though in the report. I do have a question. This is city owned, correct? This property?
It is.
Is that what I saw? And I was just wondering what the potential use or future of this building is.
Erin, would you like to address that, or is there someone here more apt to do so?
I might defer to Selah on that if she's able to speak. I know initially there were maybe talks of a museum, or, you know, they really want to celebrate the history of this place. So I don't know how far along the plans have evolved.
And I do have another question. Oh, is she?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is Sayla Miller. Yeah, so the city of Shakopee does own this property, and they plan to use it in some connection with the park system and the trail system they're developing. So they are still going through conceptual design of that, but they do plan to rehab and reuse this as part of the parks.
I talked to someone from Shakopee today, and they said there's a fantastic, beautiful trail right next to it down the river there. So that's good to hear. The other thing I noticed that in looking at the photos from the interior, and it mentions the windows were changed or something, but you do see arched top sashes, and I believe it's just the storm window that is making it a square top, and they're the combination aluminum storms or whatever it's on the outside. But by looking at that, I would think several of these windows may be original. Is that correct, Aaron, or?
Yes. So most of the first story windows are original, and then the second story windows, I believe, had been replaced, and then there were a couple on the rear elevation that also had been replaced.
Okay. Yeah, it's the write-up of this and finding out about red brick in Schrader, or however you say it. It's a nice compliment to the Chaska brick report that we saw a few years ago. To know that they both came from that area, very German heritage kind of thing. It's fun Minnesota history. Thanks.
Thanks, Board Member Stark. Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, are we ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, go
Board
ahead.
Member Stark.
Second.
Seconds it.
Board Member Stark will second it.
Who moved, who did the first motion?
Board Member White.
Frank, thank you very much. Okay, very good. Any last comments or questions before we vote?
I assume it's a motion to approve the nomination.
A motion to approve the nomination, that's correct.
Okay, people just said a motion.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Yep, that's it. That's what we're doing. Board Member Decker.
Aye.
Board Member Dyer.
Aye.
Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser.
Aye.
Board Member Mann.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Aye.
Board Member Solomonson.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone, for that. And we have one more thing on our agenda, which is listed under other business. And I'm not sure if Ginny or Amy is going to handle this. It's the selection of a nominating committee for officer positions.
I will, and Amy, unless you would like to. I think it's my pleasure.
Let's jump into me because I couldn't remember what we had.
So as we discussed at the August meeting, we are seeking to a nomination committee whose role it will be to basically survey the existing members to see if any of them wish to serve in the role of chair, vice chair, or secretary. The intention is for the committee to garner interest and then make a recommendation to the full board at February 2023's meeting. We will note, of course, that half of our board members half of our board seats are coming to term. And so there will be new members that we'll need to be orienting and voting on. I know this is awkward. We apologize. We should be voting for officers every 2 years, which was new information to me, frankly, after having read Chapter 15 recently of the Minnesota State Statute. So we will make sure that in moving forward, we are in line with that particular requirement. So I apologize for the awkward timing this time, but I'm sure that as the welcoming board that you are, we will find a way to overcome that. Okay, so
Ginny, you're looking for volunteers?
I am looking for 3 volunteers.
How many people need to volunteer for this?
I am looking for 3 volunteers with the understanding that you will likely meet twice and you will be contacting your fellow board members to gauge their interest between now and the February 2023 meeting.
And I think Jenny said she was providing dinner for you for your 2 meetings. Is that correct? Kidding. I didn't remember that she said that.
I don't recall saying that, and I'm
No,
pretty
I
sure
don't
you
think
don't
you
want
did.
my
No,
cooking.
you heard it just from me right now. Any volunteers to serve on the nominating committee? You all know this is an easy way not to be nominated for something, right? You're aware of that.
Sign me up.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, Board Member
Board Member
Koski.
Koski, the chair of the nominating committee.
Oh, God. And it ends there.
And 2 board members to join him. Board Member Solomonson has volunteered. Thank you very much. So you can see it's going to be a fun group, and you'll want to jump on in and be the 3rd member of the nominating committee. Yes, anyone? Well, do we need 3, Jenny? Is that specified somewhere?
Probably an odd number. That
I
way
know,
the,
break a
the
tie.
committee isn't split, and it's not a of one.
I'm thinking we could also take, if someone else wanted to volunteer after tonight's meeting, because
There you
board
go.
member James is not here. I don't want to put them on the spot.
That's
There you go.
We will not nominate them
Strategy.
simply because they are not here.
Absent,
because we are
that's right.
Nice people. That is fine. I will, when I send my meeting summary tomorrow, I will be sure to put out another call. Thank you, board members Koski and Solomonson, for volunteering this evening.
So Jenny, you can put me on the bench if one of the other folks isn't really excited. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Board Member
Thank you,
Dyer.
Board Member Dyer. Excellent. Very good. All right. Anything else? Staff, board members, anything else that we need to do before we adjourn?
Do we know who's up for, their terms are up, or?
Yes. So the seats that are currently terming out at the end of this calendar year are the architectural historian seat number 1, which is Chair Anderson's seat, John Decker's seat, John Stark's seat, one of our architects, and Pam Broomfeld, and Steve Olson.
And then we also have Mary's seat.
Mary
was it?
Warner.
Mhm.
Yep, Mary Warner's seat, member at large seat number 6, has been vacated for a while. We do currently have, as I said earlier, a number of applicants. We have chosen to fill Mary's seat at the same time that we fill any vacated seats, or the planned vacancies is what the Secretary of State calls them, the planned vacancies at the end of the year, so that we can pull from the entire pool of applicants to fill all the seats.
Isn't Chair Anderson's position for life? She's so good at that.
I agree.
I sit here all the time waiting for these meetings, and every 4 times a year they come around and I can do this. Yep.
I honestly have to say being vice chair is the easiest thing when you have an awesome chair.
Well, John, if my mother had needed a little more
I
attention
know,
this
I would
evening,
have
you
stepped
would have
in.
been running this meeting.
I've
It was
done that
almost yours,
once
man.
before. In 8 years or whatever it is.
We certainly
So-
appreciate all of our board members and their dedication.
Jenny, I do have a
Including,
question.
yes.
What is the quorum number that we have to have an official meeting?
Amy, I believe it's 8.
Yeah, I believe so. I have to look up the bylaws. I believe it's a majority, but yeah, I haven't referenced
Simple
that.
majority, okay.
I believe
Yep.
it's a simple majority.
Yeah.
We have 13 on the board, so that's 7, right?
Or 14 seats technically.
Oh,
so.
Yeah.
That's right. There we
Yeah.
go. 8.
Right.
That explains it. Mary's name no longer on my list.
Right.
Unfortunately not.
Well, I'm going to pull a chair move here, and I'm going to ask if Board Member Decker would like to make our motion to adjourn, since this is his last meeting. Are you there? Are you with me?
I am physically. No, I will make a motion to adjourn, and I'm going to miss you guys, miss you folks, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, John. We'll miss you too.
Hope
And
to
I think
run
we
into
need
you
a-
someplace.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. You can, these are public meetings, John. You can always just keep coming back to the meetings. You don't
I
have to
can?
read anything ahead of
yeah.
time. You can just come and listen and watch.
Oh, that'd be cool. I think I
Yes.
will. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think we need a second and then no vote. I think we're done. Is there a second to John's wonderful motion?
Board Member Schulte, second.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the meeting. We're done tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, all.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.